Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. King Charles welcomes President Donald Trump to Windsor with a carriage procession, guard of honour and military reception. The leaders share a coach amid friendly exchanges with a fly-past and state banquet still to come. Israel launches its long-awaited ground offensive into Gaza City and opens a new 48-hour route for civilians to flee. Hundreds of thousands remain sheltered amid fears of permanent displacement as officials warn the operation could last months. Saudi Arabia strongly condemns Israel's ground assault on Gaza City and urges the UN Security Council to act. The kingdom accuses Israel of killings, starvation and forced displacement as regional criticism mounts, and Qatar calls it a, quote, war of genocide. Germany says the ball is in Iran's court after European powers held talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Berlin warns sanctions will snap back unless Iran meets conditions, saying steps taken so far have not been enough. The European Commission proposes suspending trade preferences worth nearly €6 billion on Israeli exports over the Gaza war. EU diplomats also consider sanctions on Israeli ministers, violent settlers and senior Hamas members. Utah prosecutors say they will seek the death penalty for Tyler Robinson, accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Court documents revealed text messages where Robinson allegedly confessed, saying he had had enough of his hatred. Yulia Navalny says foreign lab tests on biological samples from her late husband Alexei Navalny confirm he was poisoned. Navalny died suddenly in a Russian prison last year, with the Kremlin dismissing claims of foul play as nonsense. Villarreal midfielder Thomas Partey pleads not guilty in a London court to multiple rape and sexual assault charges involving 3 women. The alleged offences date back to his time at Arsenal between 2021 and 2022. Now we start this hour in Britain, where US President and First Lady Melania Trump are now being welcomed at Windsor Castle by King Charles and Queen Camilla in the Green Drawing Room, where a special exhibition is on display to celebrate the historic US-UK relationship. The room, originally designed for King George IV, features striking green silk walls and gilded panels. Highlights include early American artifacts such as 1624 edition of General History of Virginia by John Smith and original watercolours by Mark Catesby. Earlier, Trump and Melania arrived at Windsor for the first full day of his second state visit to the United Kingdom, greeted by Prince William and Princess Catherine. The visit included ceremonial events, a horse-drawn procession and talks on trade, defence and technology. Discussions on a landmark US-UK technology agreement are also underway, focusing on AI, semiconductors and telecommunications. The day concluded with a private lunch at Windsor Castle. We are now joined by 2 guests to discuss this further, both joining us from London. Keith Vaz, former UK minister, joins us, and Mark Sutherland, geopolitical commentator, also joins us today to discuss this visit. Gentlemen, it's the first day and it has been no short of what we were promised, pomp and pageantry. However, there is diplomatic significance here as well. Keith, I want to come to you first. Let's start off broadly. How important is this visit for US-UK relations at this stage of Trump's presidency?
Good afternoon from London. People aren't dancing in the streets. at least not where I am, because this is all taking place in the middle of a park in Windsor. So the public aren't really involved in this. In terms of significance, it is significant that it's his second visit. Most presidents only come once. And when they come again after they've left office, they have tea in an informal basis with the monarch. So in terms of the status of the visit, it's unusual to get a second invitation. But of course, it is unusual for a president to get elected again after having lost an election. So to that extent, it's never happened before. And that's why he's been invited again. Donald Trump certainly will see this as an opportunity to put away the troubles from the United States and come here and be treated, well, like royalty. After all, you don't get the chance of going into a stagecoach very often. It's usually the big beast, his car, or Air Force One. So a coach is slightly different, but it's a coach going around a park where there is actually nobody watching you except officers of particular regiments. So there is no doubt it's wonderful pictures, and it will go down very well with his base. But in terms of practicalities, it's difficult to know how the dial will be moved because, of course, we have a constitutional monarch, and therefore the king cannot make any decisions of any kind. That will happen when Donald Trump goes to Downing Street, if indeed he goes to Downing Street. We don't know whether he will or not, because obviously we haven't seen the schedule. If he does, then the whole of London will be closed down. I think they're trying to avoid that. That's why it's all happening in Windsor. But this was an invitation given some time ago with great drama, because we know that the president likes a bit of drama, and somebody has advised him, maybe the former ambassador Peter Mandelson or somebody else, who knows, this is the best way to get Donald Trump happy and excited.
Yes.
But there are big questions that have to be answered. After all, King Charles is also the King of Canada, and as we know, President Trump wants Canada to become the 51st state. So although he's in the United Kingdom, King Charles is still the king of a country that Donald Trump wants to take over.
Yes, Mark Sutherland, I want to bring you in here. The UK and the US relationship is often referred to as the special relationship. Could this state visit do something significant to that and uphold that further? Why does Donald Trump hold the United Kingdom in such high regard, and why has the Britain invited Donald Trump for such a significant, unprecedented event, something that hasn't happened in modern history?
We have to, good to see you, Thomas. We have to remember that, of course, Donald Trump's mother comes from the UK, comes from Scotland. Donald Trump very proudly has Turnberry and other golf courses and other business interests up there. So there are very strong family links. Now, against the sort of left-wing propaganda that is over here in the UK, there will be many, many people that will be very, very pleased to see him over, because we do have a very, very deep and very strong relationship with America. And this particular visit, yes, King Charles invited him. We remember when Keir Starmer, as well as he's defending free speech in the White House, handing over a piece of paper with great plump saying, King Charles wants to invite you over. They are the biggest and most important trading partner that we have. If you decide to completely and utterly annoy the administration, and who have worked very hard not to put stringent tariffs that they have done in regard to other countries, they're trying to show us favor because of that relationship, then that is not a good move. We have very strong ties, no matter how this will be played out, no matter how many protests there will be against it, which of course there are. And if you ask them to actually say, why are you protesting over this visit, I would actually say to you that I wonder what their answers would be, Thomas.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. We do stay with us, gentlemen. We have further updates. Protests have continued outside Windsor Castle as US President Donald Trump has arrived for his second visit. Supporters and protesters gathered in large numbers, with the CEO of Friends of Trump UK calling it historic. Let's listen in to some of the protesters and supporters alike.
I'm here today because we are making history. Nobody thought it could be possible. In 2020, when President Trump was rigged out, the whole world thought that we are finished. We're not going to come back. But who never relent.
People say that we have to do it because obviously he's the President of the United States, but I don't think that we should be aligning ourselves politically with someone with these morals and values. I think what he's done and what he's doing in his own country is deplorable. I think, there's right and wrong, and right is a free Palestine, women that have autonomy over their own body, and leaders that don't behave the way he does. I think it's pretty simple, and I'm 100% against it.
He himself, a narcissistic Stone Age person, okay? He don't care for protocol, he don't care for the kings, he don't care for the government, he don't care for United States, he don't care for anything apart from himself, okay? For him, it's like a television show for the...
Okay, this follows a protest earlier in the day, which turned controversial when the Led by Donkeys group projected images of Trump and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein onto Windsor Castle. The video montage, which included Trump's mugshot and footage of Epstein, was displayed shortly before Trump's arrival. Police arrested 4 individuals on suspicion of malicious communications following the stunt. Mark, I want to start with you this time. What do today's protests reveal about Trump's polarizing image in Britain? We know that America, of course, a hugely polarizing country when it comes to its politics. However, the same sort of turnout, of course not as much, but the same sort of turnout for the president in the UK, both supporters and protesters alike.
I'd actually say to you what it'd be interesting to discuss what you mean by the polarization of politics within America. And I re-emphasize this. There are many, many people in this country that are the huge supporters of President 47. When there is reference made to the 2020 presidential election, there is a long story to say there in regard to, we could say, that was stolen. There is a long history and evidence to lay on the table for that, as much as that goes against a narrative within our own media within the UK. There's a lot to expand. One of the protests was probably very interesting, listening to some of those voices, because I would turn around, I wish I could actually be in front of them and actually say, what do you really mean? What do you mean? Let's just drill down. Okay. Because if the protests are about the fact that you have a president 47, president of the United States, that actually believes in strong borders, that actually believes in putting his country first and putting the American people first, then actually, as a nation state, I would turn around and say, what is actually wrong with that? Because that's certainly not being reflected within the UK. And I do find it rather interesting that projected a face of Trump, of Epstein. We've just had the recent, Mr. Mandelson, who was the ambassador, who's now had to resign because of his own relationship with Epstein as well in regard to that friendship. Thomas.
Yes, Keith, I wanted to bring you in here. The same question goes to you. We've obviously heard a group of protesters there, both supporting and protesting against the visit of the US president. When Donald Trump first came to office, all we seem to hear of is the protests against him. Now his support in the United Kingdom seems to be growing. What are your thoughts about that, Keith?
Well, he's not a politician in this country, therefore he's never going to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, but he is one of the most famous men in the world. He is the most powerful man in the world, and he's just against all odds. After all, he had 34 felonies against him, and a lot of the media against him in America. he's managed to win the popular vote and become president again. So he has proved that he is the democratically elected president of the most powerful nation on earth. So of course he's going to have detractors, and of course he's going to have supporters. But at the end of the day, for the British people, where do we go? We've come out of the EU, and therefore we can't be pals with them in the way in which we had in the past. We have to look for new markets and new friends. And the best friend that we could possibly have is the United States, because they have the biggest economy on earth. So we can't do business with the Russians because nobody's supposed to. China is always going to be suspect for the UK for whatever reason. And Trump is the only game in town. So what Keir Starmer is doing is he's listening to his officials and his advice, who say, be nice to Trump, treat him very respectfully. He is all those things, president of the biggest and most powerful nation on earth, and maybe we can get an even better deal than the one we had in the past. It's politics. I mean,
Yes.
You have to do this, I'm afraid. If the boot was on the other foot and Russia was not invading, as they have done, Ukraine, and Putin was running around, I can remember when I was Minister for Europe, we lavished Putin with attention when he came, when I was Minister for Europe. I was Minister for Russia, in fact. I never got to meet him because Tony Blair was spending all his time with him. So Britain is very good at this kind of thing. What's in the national interest? What's going to get us a better deal? How are we going to get out of this problem of the debts that we have? Let's be very, very nice to the president. And that's what they're trying to do.
Yes, Keith, Vaz and Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to have you both, as always. We now move on over to West Asia, where Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has responded to the European Union's announcement of deliberations on a proposal to curb trade concessions given to Israel and to sanction Israeli ministers over the Gaza war. Saar stated that the recommendations are morally and politically distorted. He stressed that moves against Israel would harm Europe's own interests. He wrote on X that any action against Israel would receive an appropriate response. Okay, we're now joined by John Rosamondo, and he is the president of Viking Research Associates, and he's a geopolitical analyst, and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. John, what do you make of first the EU's statements today, and that they're looking at possibly putting sanctions on Israel and some certain far-right ministers of the current Israeli government. And of course, Gideon Saar's statements calling the EU proposals, quote, morally and politically distorted.
Well, I make that the foreign ministers of Europe have decided to listen to the Hamas disinformation campaign instead of looking at the contribution made by Hamas to the death toll. We're talking about using military tunnels under hospitals, under apartment buildings. We're talking about the refusal of Arab states to take refugees from the Hamas genocide. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. If there is a genocide, it's been caused by Hamas. It's been caused by Hamas's refusal to let go of the hostages. And Israel can stop sharing intelligence with the European countries related to terrorists in their midst.
Okay, John Rosamondo. What are your thoughts? Does Israel promises will promise an appropriate response? Israel's economy is slacking from this war. How can it respond if the EU does impose sanctions appropriately to a bloc of 27 European countries like the EU?
Well, I think that the Europeans are forcing Israel to look elsewhere. I think you heard today that Prime Minister Netanyahu reaching out toward India. India has a $1.4 billion market, and the Indians have been among Israel's biggest allies. I think that, and also Israel has been looking for markets elsewhere. So I think that, while it may hurt Israel in the near term, I think the long-term consequences, are far less certain for those trying to sanction Israel.
Yes, John Rosamondo, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We now move on and over east, where the South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi at the Duotai State Guest House in Beijing, expressing hopes for a visit by President Xi Jinping to South Korea later this year for deeper bilateral cooperation between the two countries. It was Hyun's first official visit to China since taking office, a move widely seen as an effort by Seoul to revitalize diplomatic ties and shifting landscape. During the talks, Hyun had highlighted the significance of the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit to be held in Gyeongju, North Gyeongsang Province, at the end of next month. Hyun said that it's very meaningful that APEC is being hosted in North Asia. And this year it will be held by China, and then next year once again. He also said that he hopes this will serve not only as an opportunity to advance APEC itself, but also to deepen Korea-China relations. He also added, "I look forward to working with Xi Jinping and him attending the Gyeongju summit and visiting Korea, which would contribute to the further development of bilateral ties." Meanwhile, Yang responded, saying that China and Korea are close neighbours. We need to teach each other often and increase exchanges. This helps deepen understanding, avoid misjudgments, promote mutual trust and expand cooperation. We are now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute and he joins us live from Manila. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. Can you tell us a bit more about the Sino-Korean relationship and how it may develop in the future, their interests going forward?
Originally, China and South Korea has a reason to cooperate because view from the structure, South Korea's concerning matter came from North Korea. But North Korea's former ally is China, so that's why South Korea expects China's influence towards North Korea could be useful for the South Korea. In this case, South Korea should cooperate with China to restrain this North Korea. But that could happen. But this is the structure of in this Northeast region. But the current new president, which sworn in recently, the President Lee in the South Korea, personally, he is tilting toward China because he is also a very soft stance toward North Korea, and this is traditional policy of him and his party. So his predecessor chose the same course too. That was President Moon. That's why the United States concerned about a new president of the South Korea, and the relation between US and South Korea is gradually deteriorating just now. So that's why China tried to exploit such kind of situation to persuade South Korea more close to China instead of the United States. That's why China is pushing just now. The problem is for China is even if there is a tactical chance for China to improve the relation with South Korea, South Korea is still Western side and the American side country. So there is a limitation to close to China, even if South Korean government want to be the more cordial relation with China. So that's why China try to push, but will it really made it? At least some certain limitation, it will happen, but limitation is limitation. That is the answer, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Satoru Nagao, for joining us here on the programme. Pleasure to have you as always. We now move on once again where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has thanked Russian President Vladimir Putin for his birthday greetings. In a post on X, Modi referred to Putin as a friend and reiterated his commitment to strengthening the special strategic partnership with Russia. Modi's message also touched upon the Ukraine conflict, stating that India is ready to contribute towards a peaceful resolution. The two leaders, who share close ties, had also met recently during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, hosted by China, where Russia-Ukraine conflict was among the many issues discussed. We are now joined by Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador and he joins us live from New Delhi. What can you tell us, Ambassador Sachdev, about this close relationship between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin in relation to the Ukraine war? Of course, President Trump has imposed significantly high tariffs on India, citing the Indian purchase on Russian oil, while having to manage this seemingly and noticeably close relationship with the Indian Prime Minister. What's your analysis, Ambassador?
Thank you for having me. And,
Pleasure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you for having me. And I believe this call was essentially meant to greet Prime Minister on his 75th birthday, but it involved more discussion on issues of bilateral concern. Firstly, about Ukraine crisis, which Prime Minister offered to help resolve, and this was accepted, and the two leaders talked about it. Secondly, about Mr. Putin's forthcoming visit to India for annual discussions that bilaterally take place between the two countries. There was also a Russian playback which talked about President Putin having greatly assessed Prime Minister's contribution to bilateral ties and thanked him for playing such an important role in bringing the two countries together. Now, with regard to the Ukraine crisis per se, India has two reasons to help. Firstly, India wants this war to conclude. Prime Minister has publicly told President Putin that this was not the time of war, this was the time of peace. He was among the first major leaders to say it on the face in public media. Secondly, India, as you mentioned, is suffering from 25% additional sanctions, secondary sanctions that the United States imposed, alleging that India was buying crude from Russia, and these supplies were furthering Kremlin's capacity to wage the war. Many other invectives have been used by people in the White House. President Trump himself had mentioned these things. So if we are able to be seen as helping resolve the crisis, I think this would disrepute the allegations being made on India's motives and buying crude from Russia, etc. And it'll eventually, if the ceasefire or peace treaty results in resolution of the problem, the sanctions may not become important tool all over again, and India would not be subject to the 25% additional levies for its exports to the United States. So those are the motives, and I think Prime Minister is doing everything possible in this regard.
Yes, Ambassador Sachdev, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us here on NewsX World. We now move on over to the African continent, where at least 50 Sudanese refugees have died after their boat caught fire off the coast of eastern Libya, the International Organization for Migrants has confirmed. The incident occurred on Sunday when a rubber boat carrying 75 Sudanese migrants caught fire near Tobruk, Libya, while en route to Greece. The IOM reported that half of the passengers lost their lives in the tragic event, and the survivors are currently receiving assistance. The organisation did not disclose further details about the survivors' condition or the ongoing rescue efforts. The IOM has expressed condolences and reiterated calls for greater protection and support for vulnerable refugees in the region. Well, that is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.